We are going to take a look at nav menus, navigation menus that have been styled in Bootstrap. And first, we'll kind of look at how it's applied to just regular HTML. And then we will take a look at how it can be applied in MVC. Because MVC does use Bootstrap navigational menus. So the nav tag, which is your HTML5 semantic, should include a class set to container. And then in a kind of a traditional HTML menu, you have an unordered list, and then each line is basically formatted with a link. So the UL tag is going to have a class set to nav, and then each of the lines is going to have a class set to nav item. The link itself, your anchor tag, is going to have a class set to nav link. So how this looks, this is kind of generic HTML, but you can see we have nav class equal container. We have the unordered list where the class is set to nav. Then we have a line. So this is a nav item. And then we have the link itself. That is a nav link. So you can kind of see how that works. This is how it looks with the actual links in it. Okay, so here's the container class, got some text. Here's my UL tag, class set to nav. Then each line, I've got nav item for the class. And then within the anchor tag, I've got nav link. And then this is how that looks. So you can see by default, I'm getting a nice horizontal navigation menu. If you want a vertical menu, it's kind of the same, except you have to add flex column next to container. So where we have class equal container, you add flex column, everything else stays the same, and you get a vertical menu. Other kinds of menus that you can have would be a tabbed menu. So where do you tell it that it's a tabbed menu? You tell it in the unordered list tag. So you still have to have a class set to nav, but then you add nav tabs so it knows it's a tabbed menu. And then you can actually add contextual colors. So here is what that looks like. And you can see that I added BG dark. There are lots of other options as far as these simple navigation menus. And if you select the link here, you can kind of check them out. What MVC tends to use is the navigation bar, and that navigation bar is used in the layout page. So we are going to take a look first at how it looks in regular HTML, and then we're going to take a look at how MVC applies this. So to create this horizontal navigation bar, and the horizontal bar is typically what you see, you have your navigation element, and you add class equal navbar. Now, to make it a responsive class, which means that it collapses when it's small, you need to include navbar expand, and then you're either going to choose small, medium, large, or extra large. This navbar expand, small, medium, large, or extra large, not only makes it responsive, but it also makes it horizontal. And again, the small is for, a phone. Medium is for more of a tablet. And it is smart enough to know to adjust the size for the device. So I like to see how it's going to look on the phone. So I usually pick small. If you do not like the default colors, you can change them. And then this is in a traditional menu. Your UL tag is going to be navbar-nav. Your line is going to have a navbar item, and your anchor is going to have a nav link. Okay, so it is kind of similar to what we had before. The difference is this is an entire bar instead of just the menu. And so here's how that looks. If you want a vertical bar, you just remove the navbar expand class. Now, typically, the navigation bar also has a branding or a logo, and this is included in MVC. So you still have at the top your class of navbar and then navbar expand with small, medium, large, whatever. And below that, that is where you put kind of a dummy link for navbar brand. And you can see it's a dummy link because my href is equal to a hashtag. And then you can see I still have navbar nav, I got nav item, I've got nav link, and this is how that looks. Now, typically when you collapse these, you want the hamburger to display. That's like a 3 lines so that you can click on that and a menu will show up. So there is a little finagling that you need to do to get that hamburger to display and to get it to connect with your menu. So the syntax here for the button and for the hamburger. So the button itself has a class of navbar toggler because you can, turn it on and off. The type is button. Data toggle is going to be set to collapse and data target. So this is where your menu is located. Okay. And you'll notice it's got a hash collapsible navbar. So the hash indicates ID. So this is like an internal link. Then between the opening and closing button, this is where we indicate what icon we want to display, and we want the little hamburger, which is the 3 lines. And so we set the class to navbar toggler icon, and that's how we get that little hamburger to display. Now, data target needs to connect to an ID. So where do you put that ID? You have to add that right above your unordered list. So above the unordered list, you're going to have an ID of collapsible navbar, and this is also where you're going to put a class of collapse and navbar collapse. And that all combined is going to give you the hamburger on a mobile device, and when you click on it, it's going to expand and give you a menu. So how does that look in MVC? You may have noticed this in a layout page, and now you're going to understand what all of this stuff means. So in the nav tag, we have class set to navbar, and then we want a horizontal one. So we have navbar expand small. We want to be able to toggle it open and shut. So we have that set on as well. And then the rest are for formatting. So the navbar light gives us the light color. Background white also gives us the light color. We are specifying a border on the bottom. We are specifying a box shadow and a bottom margin of 3. Remember, you can have 0 to 5 for that. Everything has to be in a container, so the container comes next, followed by the navbar brand. And so what we have this set to is the home controller index action method. And so if they click on it, that's where they go. And this is the text that's displaying. However, you could have an icon here, or you can have a logo graphic. Okay, it doesn't have to be text. Then we've got our button that we talked about a minute ago. Nothing is really different in this button other than MVC has added area controls. And area is for screen readers, and it's kind of an ADA compliant feature. Then this navbar toggler icon is giving us that hamburger. And then if you remember, we have to connect the data target here. Oop, where is it? Yeah, data target with what we have here. Now, what's interesting is instead of an ID, which they normally use for a data target, they have used a class. Okay, and so you'll notice that here's the class and here is the matching class. Okay, so in MVC, they decided to go the class route instead of the ID route. So we've got navbar collapse for our class. We have collapse, and then we've got some additional formatting. At that point, it is bringing in the partial view with the login information in it. And we'll talk more about that later. But when you create an MVC app and you tell it you want authentication, you get a login and a register link that are on the right-hand side. Those are located in login partial. Then we get into the actual menu itself. So we have a class set to navbar nav. It's got flex grow set to 1. So the items, I believe by default, are just going to be regular sized. If you change that number and make it larger, they'll get bigger. Your class set to nav item and class set to nav link are required. Nav item is required in the line and nav link is required in the anchor. And then you'll notice we have the tag helpers here. So ASP area set to blank. Remember, you're only going to set areas for really, really large scale apps, okay, where you can't, you're a huge multinational company and just trying to organize controllers is a headache and you need to split things out into areas. Okay, so we aren't going to be working on anything that big, so area is always going to be blank for us. Then you have to specify the controller and you have to specify the action method, followed by whatever text you want to display in your menu. Now, if you want to know more information on navbars, I included a link, but this is very typical of what you're going to see in MVC. Okay, and so what is the area class? I explained a little bit about it. It's basically used for accessibility. And if you are planning on modifying or inserting any of those tags, you do need to understand what they do, and I included a link to that as well.